Kinsey's research was so influential. It's probably the most influential piece of social science research in human history, and it was junk science.
If we could test the intellectual atmosphere that you grew up in, whose ideas would show up as being the most prominent? As strange as that sounds, for most of us, it would be the ideas of Charles Darwin. His thoughts on the nature and purpose of human life are everywhere. We see them everywhere, from our TV commercials to our governmental policies, and we see how dangerous they are. But let's get specific. Let's look at how Darwin has influenced your view on sex.
According to Darwin, are humans different in any real substantial sense than the rest of the animal kingdom?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we evolved from monkeys.
I think they're different, but he says that we evolved from animals, so.
Humans specifically are obviously they're more advanced, so there's a lot more care that needs to be taken to them.
If human beings are essentially animals, how can we define sex in a Darwinian system?
Basically, you produce as many healthy offspring as you can so that they can have as many healthy offspring as they can,
Right.
and on and on and on, because that's how you win the race of life.
Do you think apps like Tinder operate on a survival of the fittest mentality?
Yeah, they definitely kind of narrow things down.
Yes, I feel like that's kind of the whole premise of that.
Someone's gonna put only the best information, only the best picture of themselves on the app so that they can try and beat out other people.
What impact do you think Darwin has right now on the sexual norms of our society?
Darwin's argument has been taken by modern Darwinists, by evolutionary psychologists and others, to basically that men are programmed for promiscuity, and that's just the way it is, and so we shouldn't try to impose ideas of monogamy on them, whereas women just have to live with that.
Do you think that apps like Tinder have had an overall good impact on our society or an overall bad impact on our society?
Really bad.
Why is that?
I think it's really not healthy for our generation, just mentally, emotionally, physically. It warps people's minds. It warps the minds of young people, and it scares me. It worries me for future generations, because if they continue on this path, I'm worried about their mental health.
Yeah.
Because that kind of stuff, that dependency, leads to depression, leads to addiction.
What effect do you think it has on what we would call the hookup culture?
I think it provides an additional justification. And if you look out in popular culture, the idea men are programmed for promiscuity and that they can't help themselves, and that's just how biologically they've been developed, that's at the base of it. You don't need to feel guilty, because you're just created to have sex as many times as you can with as many healthy females as you can.
What does consent look like between two animals?
I feel like in the animal world, consent is often thrown out the window.
I don't know if I would believe that they have consent.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure, man.
If the human goal is to do the same thing every other animal does in a Darwinian system, which is to reproduce, what does that say about rape?
There were two anthropologists who wrote a book called A Natural History of Rape, where their argument was that because everything's produced ultimately by natural selection for some survival advantage, that has to be true of rape. Now, they said that they weren't justifying it, but on the other hand, if that's the only reason why we have those behaviors, on what basis do you criticize it? Anything in nature, from rape to cruelty to you name it, to infanticide, how do you objectively say that it's wrong if it's something that is programmed into us and was developed at some point by natural selection to help our survival value?
You ever heard of Alfred Kinsey?
The name has crossed my ears a couple of times, but I'm sorry.
Okay. He could be credited for starting the sexual revolution.
Alfred Kinsey, how has he affected sexual norms today?
Alfred Kinsey is to sex what Darwin is to biology and everything else. Alfred Kinsey was the father of the sexual revolution. He wrote a book in 1948 called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, and it basically revolutionized our view of sex. He convinced people that we were programmed for adultery, bestiality, I mean, you name it. Kinsey's research was so influential. It's probably the most influential piece of social science research in human history, and it was junk science. Because what he basically did was he went and interviewed people in prisons, pedophiles, sex offenders, then extrapolated that data to the rest of society. So for example, he looked at adultery, and he basically said the vast majority of men were committing adultery on their wives based off of this sample size. It wasn't true at the time. It actually isn't even true today. The whole point he was trying to make is that, well, yes, we have our sexual standards, but biology has dictated something else, and so we need to get with it. We need to change our laws. We need to change our morals because they don't fit our biology.
I think I've actually heard of this study. It like shocked everybody.
Yes,
that
it
everyone
did.
was having adultery, and
Yep.
bestiality in these small towns was like.
Yep. 20% were supposed to have sex with animals. If you were an undergraduate today and tried to pass off his research as an undergraduate research paper, you would fail.
How was Alfred Kinsey influenced by Charles Darwin's ideas?
Alfred Kinsey, and most people don't know this, was trained as an evolutionary biologist. And so his whole approach of studying what he called normal mammalian behavior was a Darwinian approach, to look at what our biology was, what evolution helped produce, and if you could basically find it in nature somewhere, in some subpopulation, that must have served some evolutionary function at some point. That's how it got ingrained, and so it's equally natural with everything else. So he owed a lot to how he viewed sexuality from how he was trained as a Darwinian biologist.
You know that you're more than just a procreating machine, that you have transcendent purpose. With Darwin, nothing has transcendent purpose. Everything is reduced to atoms and accidental advantages. Every urge you have within you is just there to make you reproduce. You and your relationships are nothing more than a complicated bundle of animalistic instincts. You might be saying, okay, John, I see that Darwin is in my life, maybe even telling me things to go against what I believe, but so what? The so what is this. Darwin's impact doesn't stop in the intellectual realm. He's got an effect on your personal safety. How so? Find out next on Road Trip to Truth.